Okay, recording in progress for anybody that has questions about this, the 2023 trends presentation. Um, Obviously, we're starting right on time, so I'm going to allow for a moment or two for everyone to filter in. So I'm going to do what I do best, which is talk and kill everyone's time. This is obviously the presentation that will go on over the trends for this past year and preparing for this coming year. A good number of folks in the presentation, more likely than not, are going to be rising seniors, but we're going to have some other students that'll be younger. I still think that this is going to be helpful for everyone. A lot of the trends that we were exposed to during 2020 during the 2022-2023 cycle will with any luck die down a little bit over the coming years, although I don't have much hope for that, especially in the case of the University of California, which we'll get to. But again, to start off, this presentation is intended to revisit how things went for the class of 2023. And I've spoken to a lot of you about this. As I've mentioned it to you, I use some of our meetings to kind of try out some of the material and the figures. But this has taken some time to go through because there was a lot of weird stuff that happened this year, as I'm sure everybody is quite aware of. Let me see. Okay, so what our agenda is going to be today, to start everything off, is results from this past year, private schools, public schools, UC in particular, trends based on our comparatively small sample size, predictions from last year that I made during the same presentations, how they worked out, and trends for the future, how things are potentially going to work out for the coming year. And obviously, we have time for questions and answers. And as always, you ask me a 5-second question, I'll give you a 10-minute answer, something that everybody obviously loves. But please, I'll try and make it as quick as possible. And if it's something personal, you can always feel free to drop me a line, email me with any questions or issues. But the 5 things that we're going to hit this year. Now that most people have kind of filtered in, the results are what everybody wants to check out first. So results this year, on paper, crassly for the purposes of marketing, were very good. They worked out well for our 35 or so seniors. There's not a whole lot of overlap among the students that were admitted to these schools. We had 3 UPenn, all 3 from public high schools, just for the record. A Cornell, that's from a local private high school. Chicago, private high school. 1 Rice, public high school. Emory, public high school. Princeton, MIT, and one of the Berkeleys is the same person. Princeton and MIT, public. Caltech public, Claremont McKenna public high school, just about everybody public, WashU and Georgetown. So results, very, very good, I would say overall. For top 25 schools, real solid. For Ivies, not bad. 3 Penns, real good, impressive. So overall, at least as far as the results, I was quite happy with the private school stuff. And generally speaking, students that were at a certain level, there weren't many students that I would say were not happy with the offers that they received, at least getting one offer that they were very, very happy with. That was not quite the same with everything with our trends, especially with the University of California. The private schools were good. The top 25, top 20 were good. UC overall was good, but UC for computer science and for engineering in particular, just absolute backbreakers. I mean, to go over students that you'd consider bad beats in computer science, bad beats, obviously, taking from the not obviously, but taking from the poker term, you got a good hand, but you wind up getting beat anyways, and that's kind of par for the course with a lot of the computer science students. All the names are changed on here, so you have to give me a minute just to kind of keep in mind who it is that I've changed the name from. Andy, a student at Palo Alto High School, admitted to Purdue and Wisconsin, both for computer science, denied waitlisted to all University of California schools with the exception of UC Santa Cruz. Student was solid too. good numbers, good experience, scouts, so good extracurricular, non-academic experience, a good amount of academic CS-related experience, and admitted to Purdue, top 10 CS program, first CS program in the country. Admitted to Wisconsin, getting quite a bit harder, generally speaking, but denied to all UCs, aside from UC Santa Cruz. Next one down, Elizabeth C. This is one that just changed recently, literally last week. Denied or waitlisted to all UCs aside from UC Santa Cruz. Last week, admitted off the waitlist to Harvey Mudd, top liberal arts school, top average pay in the country, after MIT. Just pump kids into Silicon Valley. No other liberal arts school does it. It's an engineering-oriented LAC. A massive, huge win in addition to Wisconsin and Purdue. Big wins, but Harvey Mudd just massive. Denied to waitlisted everybody aside from UC Santa Cruz. That was one of the students that we had maybe two or three. Two, she was one of them that just got like decimated, and it's like, boy, what happened? And but Harvey Mudd thankfully came through with the waitlist. Next one down, another one from a local school in Fremont. Admitted to Illinois computer science, admitted to Michigan computer science, letters and sciences, denied or waitlisted to everybody up until UC Santa Cruz. UC Santa Cruz is really, they threw the arms open wide this year, but not for everyone. Ravi admitted to Illinois computer engineering, denied or waitlisted to all the UCs through Riverside. So the only one that worked out was Merced. But UI, UC, CE, top CS program, top CE program, don't take tons of kids from out of state, admitted there, but, waitlisted to Riverside. UCs were rough this year. Obviously, and this is something that everybody has certainly heard. It's something that through my small sample size, it's quite apparent. This is something that we'll only know really the data for with when we see the results of the UC count and the disclosing the UC counselor conference. I did see a video last night on it was under the Berkeley Reddit, and it spoke about a presentation from Berkeley is putting together this new college of computing and data science and things like that. But this past year, for the first year, they admitted students directly into computer science under letters and sciences. It was like 99 kids that they admitted. And it's like from Lynbrook alone, they probably had 99 kids applying there. It was insane. So we'll really see the numbers as time goes on, and presentations like this filter their way into Twitter and Instagram and Reddit and so on and so forth. We'll see more and more about this, but really the information will come out at the UC Counselor Conference when we wind up seeing that in September. But yeah, UC rough, computer science rough. There still are some opportunities there. UC Santa Cruz, notably, aside from Robbie, who wound up getting shafted all the way through Riverside. Illinois computer science plus X programs. That's not quite as self-explanatory. A lot of students are aware of these probably because we got a lot of precocious college folks in our group. But the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, they obviously have their computer science major under the Granger School of Engineering. They also have about a dozen, maybe 10, what are called CS plus X programs that are administered by the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. And those are everything from computer science and education, computer science and crop sciences, computer science and economics, computer science and advertising, a number of computer science and linguistics, computer science and philosophy. From what I've been told by people that do hiring in the Valley, as long as students have the computer science core, they're still just about as hireable as students that would wind up having the CS degree as a whole. So if you're doing CS plus advertising at Illinois, you're going to have some advertising classes, some classes in art and design, some classes where you're going to probably be applying, CS principles to advertising results. but more than anything else, it's going to have a CS core, and it should be something that prepares the students for employability. But the big thing is, what I'm neglected to mention, much easier to get into. Illinois for out-of-state CS majors, another student on Reddit did a great request for free. It was a Freedom of Information Act request. So I think 4.34% out-of-state admit rate to CS at UIUC. They didn't do a breakdown of the CS plus X majors because they're out of engineering, but just anecdotally, we had tons of success with those this year. Those should be still solid for next year. Wisconsin, Maryland, Virginia Tech. Wisconsin and Maryland got tougher. Va-Tech next year should get tougher because they had a banner year of students applying to CS, but still very accessible. Va-Tech. Maryland, a little bit of waitlisting and deferring, but not that bad. Wisconsin, they're admitting more and more students off the wait list over the past week. They're all, and these are students that are not like 4.0s that are getting off the wait list. They're like 3.4s, 3.5s. Va-Tech, top 20 CS program. Maryland, top 15. Wisconsin, top 20, although you have to move in after going through letters and sciences. So all good options, all quite accessible still. Purdue, excellent this year as well. Good for CS, good for data science. Still, that's changing. It's getting harder, as it has every year up until like 2 years ago. Purdue was like the evergreen safety. Not so much as of about, not this cycle, but the past one. The top students, the good students have ultimately gotten in, but a number of deferrals, a number of wait lists that have gotten students a little bit scared. But Purdue, accessible. Wisconsin, accessible. Maryland, accessible. Virginia Tech, by students in the know, number 2 food in the country after UCLA. It does seem that UCLA, after having lost one of its contracts with a restaurant company, they're getting worse. So maybe Virginia Tech's up to the top. Small privates, still very accessible. Small privates, meaning schools that are tech-oriented, that do come out having students be largely employable. Rensselaer Polytech, Worcester Polytech, Rochester Institute of Technology, Stevens Institute of Technology. Students getting admitted to a number of these programs, still largely safe and with money. RPI came through with, I think, $20,000 or $25,000 this year for a student that was a good, solid student. Not with perfect tests, not with perfect grades, but higher than average. RPI, good. Got its problems, high cost of attendance, but the scholarship tempered that. Weird antagonistic relationship with the administration. In the middle of kind of a burnt out steel town in Troy, New York, but otherwise, real solid, especially practically speaking, and especially for employability. So good programs to think about, and can be made, not that far off of the cost of attendance of UC. Cost of attendance for UC, más o menos, more or less, being around $41,000, $42,000 a year. Other computer science opportunities that I have this last bullet here, which nobody ever takes me up on, and I've been trying to push this for probably the last 4 or 5 years now. But students really should consider liberal arts colleges that have some presence in the Silicon Valley. And for everybody, for all students that are seniors, I map out your college list. If you're a computer science student who has not expressly said, I don't want to go to a little bitty college, you're going to find schools in there like Swarthmore, like Williams, like Haverford, like Carleton, like McAllister, like Davidson, that most people know through Steph Curry, but is also, has a presence at Google. So these schools are schools to consider. You're going to get, you're going to be underrepresented there. Typically CS students from California, which largely a good chunk of students are that are probably listening to this. You're going to be underrepresented. CS males in particular, liberal arts colleges tend to skew largely female. So if you're looking for a place where you're looking for kind of, a demographic edge, West Coast male CS, none of them are in the majority at Swarthmore, Haverford, Davidson, Carleton, McAllister, Harvey Mudd, they're in state. Pomona's in state. They get a lot of California kids, but the other ones that I mentioned, not so much, not in state, obviously. Okay, so that's first trend. Or things are hard with UC, but still pockets of admissibility outside of UC. Trend 2, leadership does separate with UC. This is not anything that's new. It did start to become apparent when the applications really spiked about 6 or 7 years ago. At least that was like the wave I can remember where really things started changing a while back. The leadership has always been something that UCs across the board have found significant, in particular Berkeley and LA. So, all of these are all Berkeley kids this year. And all of these kids, for the most part, we're not perfect on paper. UC is, in fact, all of these I selected for that very reason. Because I don't have the student that was the Princeton MIT student on here. All of these students were not perfect. And for UC, the UC GPA is by far the most significant thing. And you get a couple of Bs, at least as far as like what's called eligibility in the local context, eligibility in the state context, or eligibility in the local context. A couple of Bs, you're outside of the top 20, 30% of your class at Mission, at Lynbrook, at Monte Vista, at Irvington. So, these are real wins. You got a couple of Bs on your transcript, you're getting into Cal, you're doing something right. And the thing that all of these students did in right that were in common was the significant leadership stuff. UC Berkeley Econ, ASB rep, club president of multiple clubs, a business founder, and I believe she was also head of her dance troupe at school in their visual arts program. Another Berkeley Econ, this is a Monte Vista kid, founder of 2 businesses, outreach coordinator and manager for 2 nonprofits. Businesses failed, but he managed them well. The nonprofit work was very good also, but significant leadership, all disclosed in the essays. UC Berkeley Chem, captain of the tennis team. One of the big, as I always say, the holy trinity of leadership is, ASB president, varsity captain, co-captain, editor-in-chief of the yearbook or paper. He tennis captain, kung fu team captain, lead trumpet as Dixieland Jazz Band, teacher at FCSN, lots of good outreach, lots of good leadership. Next one down. That's right, this was from the Peninsula. Robotics captain, nonprofit regional leader, real solid. Nonprofit captain outside of the regional leader thing, and captain of the soccer team in high school. So very good also. And finally, UC Berkeley physics. A lot of flaws on the transcript, not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. Founded an astronomy club at his school where he was a new student, transferred schools in 11th grade, founded a club as a new student in astronomy because he was interested in astronomy and physics at a new school. Who's going to do that? Forget about it. My goodness, forget about the stress. CTO, also chief technology officer of a 501c3 that was started in his areas, and also an Eagle Scout. Eagle is always good. Eagle is, even as far back as I've mentioned to many of you, as when I was in UC, which was like, not even in the Obama administration, so a long time ago, but quite far back. Still, Eagle was a significant leadership award. Eagle, I mentioned that because in our area, there's a good amount of students that do get Eagle, but it is something that, nevertheless, in spite of the non-rarity of it in our area, is rare across the country, and coveted at UC. So trend 3, we've got CS and engineering real tough. We've got leadership separating for UC. Let's check out something outside of UC. And this is something that I've felt for the last couple of years. And like I said, I don't have the data because we don't have a very large sample size, but I've been doing it long enough where when there's smoke, there's fire. So casting the net wide, it does help for a top 25. What does that mean? It means that if you've got the numbers close enough, you don't have to be perfect, but if you've got the numbers, if you've got the course rigor, if you've got the curiosity and a somewhat robust extracurricular profile, you're going to be in the conversation for top 20 schools. What happens after that is largely demographic needs. Let me give some illustrations. So this was our Miss America from this year. Perfect SAT, perfect grades at her high school, 36 semesters of honors and AP credit, honors and AP classes that she's taken. In comparison, the average for admitted Berkeley and LA kids is 23. So she's 1.5 times above like the average rigor at the most rigorous, the most rigor demanding schools in the country. Just crazy activities, you know, county science fair winner, patents, assistant editor-in-chief of the school paper, poetry award winner, and I didn't mention a head of a teen literary magazine. Did Caltech SSP summer before senior year. SSP has been around since the 50s. Real like pipeline is Caltech as well as a bunch of other schools. Not quite. Beaverworks, been around for a little bit, but among the most selective, toughest summer programs that are out there for computer science right now, probably the toughest. Where does she apply to? Pretty much, you know, the majority of the schools in the top 20 in the country. You know, where was she successful to? She was successful to Princeton. She was successful to MIT. She was successful at MET at Berkeley. Where was she denied to? Pretty much everywhere else. You know, the point being that there's a reason to deny everyone. You know, we've got so you know, if you're ever wondering, you know, does my application have a flaw? Almost certainly it does. You know, there's just only so many hours in a week. You know, not everybody can be, you know, all-state squash player as well as USICO Platinum, as well as novel publisher, as well as ASB president, and all-around good person. You're always going to have flaws. Even in the case of students that are getting into the most selective schools in the country, there are going to be schools that don't accept those. What were her flaws? You know, probably some things on paper, and there are definitely some things that I could allude to. But off paper, a bunch of things that she can't, or things that are outside of her control. Field of interest, where she went to high school, didn't go to a fancy school from Southern California, but didn't go to Cater Thatcher. Didn't go to a place with tons of connections, didn't go to Harvard Westlake. Popular major that she was interested in, wasn't interested in like medieval studies or something like that. At the end of the day, you know, as I've mentioned to pretty much all of you, you know, if you've got the numbers, if you've got the profile extracurricular that's interesting and compelling enough and have some depth, if you've challenged yourself, you know, you're in the conversation. To give a better illustration from the other end, a student that you know, case two, good student, not perfect, not the world beater like the first one. A B every semester that he had, although he did take the toughest rigor available at his school. You need that for the top 20 schools. SAT 1560, not the 1600 like the other one, but after 1550, it doesn't move the needle that much. Activities, good, somewhat developed. Chicago summer program, good brainy experience. Faculty research, we helped him set up, good brainy experience. Private equity internship through dad. Tennis captain, good leadership experience. Major in business, application, you know, to a whole bunch of schools, a bunch in the top 12, a bunch that were intended to launch his career into private equity, you know, one after another. Denial, waitlist, denial, waitlist. March 30th comes along. Who else comes along? Rice. Why Rice when not everybody else that was in there? Could be any number of reasons. Could be the fact that Rice has a foundering business program for undergrads that they launched 3 years ago. Not foundering, but not as popular as they thought it was going to be, apparently. So, you know, they might be looking for students to fill that. Or perhaps they didn't have any other students applying from his high school or his general reason. You know, it's something that, again, if you've got the numbers, if you've got the profile that's close enough, you're going to be in the conversation of the top 20. I bring this one up also because Rice is, it was kind of like the last edition, you know, but you don't know what the demographic needs are of the school. You don't know what the academic needs are of the school, you know. So what does that mean? It's a good question. We'll get to that momentarily. Another one, third example. Let's see. Okay, admitted to Wash U. We see that at the bottom, saving a little bit of the mystery and the drama. Handful of B's, good rigor, tough rigor. At a Fremont High School, you know, where you're, you know, it is tough to get, you know, rigor. Y'all don't have. I'm not going to say what high school it was, but you know, not every high school there has the variety of the AP and honors classes that Harker does. SAT, solid SAT score. So he's got the numbers, got a couple of B's, but challenged himself. He's got the numbers. Cool activities. NASA research, faculty research, tennis captain, sustained service, biochem major, applied broadly, applied widely, applied early. The two real ringing successes, Cal and Washington University in St. Louis. Guy's not perfect, but he was competitive. He had the numbers to compete. Wash U wasn't necessarily up there as the top school, but he's ultimately choosing Cal, I believe. But Wash U was a nice win. So does that mean that you should blanket the top 20, top 25 schools in the country in order to kind of suss out who has what demographic need? I don't think so, man. I mean, that is like the most unhealthy thing in the entire world. Nobody, or not a lot of people, have the time for that. I would say it would take a toll on people's mental health, getting one denial after another, after another, after another. But it is something to consider that if you've got the numbers, the notion of there being a perfect fit for a student and a perfect fit for a school is really marketing. A lot of what it comes down to is what is the school's need demographically in that particular cycle. And these are the takeaways. The great backwards animation that I have. Most perfect applicants don't get everything, like we saw the first student that was, as I said, Miss America. Academically speaking, couldn't have been better, but extracurricular profile, like everybody, something's lacking. Just demographically, you never know how you're gonna wind up standing. And I've mentioned this to a lot of people before, as I'm prone to do. When I was in private college admissions, which was a generation ago. But I would, one of my territories was Alabama, and I would get, phone calls from the dean of the College of Business that would say, we don't have enough black male business majors from Alabama. Well, next time you're at a college fair, or if you're at such and such high school, flag them and send their prospect card my way. We didn't. So the point is that the needs of a school, as far as admissions are concerned, as far as demographics are concerned, is something that not only do we not know right now, but the school doesn't really know until they sit down and they kind of regroup and they figure out what their needs are. And it can even shift during the middle of an application cycle. So a lot of needs, a lot of stakeholders, so to speak, if you wanted to speak about it in that way, in the application process. Okay, let's keep going with this. Trend 4, applying early can generally speaking help. There are 2 ways of applying early, which everybody, or I'd say probably most people, are familiar with. But there's going to be a lot of folks out there that are not familiar with these, or not familiar with the verbiage. So I think that I've explained this up to like 15 times for a parent at one point, the difference between early decision and early action. Early decision and early action are the 2 ways generally of applying early. Both of these deadlines are usually November 1st. Early decision is a binding agreement where the applicant basically says, if you let me in, I'll go with my money. Early action is a non-binding agreement where the applicant applies early, typically by November 1st, and gets an earlier decision than other students do, but not much of a statistical advantage. How much does the statistical advantage, help at the Ivies? This is from this year, which is, it's always holes at this point because Cornell doesn't publish until later, and I think Columbia and Princeton has stopped doing it entirely. But you can see there's a difference between the early decision and regular decision admit rate. Let me go to the next slide. That's last year's. These are better. So last year's numbers by comparison, we've got, as you can see, well, I think the most pronounced is Dartmouth, where we've got a 20% ED admit rate, the one that locks you in, and a 4.7% RD admit rate, regular decision. The 20% isn't totally accurate for normal people like me and you. It's that included in these 20% are recruited athletes, children of donors, politically connected folks. So, for the hoi polloi, the regular, Jane and Joes of the world, it's probably closer to maybe 12%, one would think, 13% for for early decision for normal regular people. Still an advantage. I guess it's a reason to lock your money in, lock yourself in, lock your money in. You don't have any opportunity really to negotiate financial aid or scholarship awards if you apply early decision. But if you're rank hunting, it is a way to go after the great white whale of the Ivy Leagues, is to try and leverage early decision numbers in your favor. And it's even more than at the Ivies, at LACs, liberal arts colleges. That's when you can really, really take advantage of early decision arrangements. Williams, triple the admit rate. Barnard's almost quintuple the admit rate. Swarthmore, quadruple the admit rate. Y'all can do math. You see the difference between all of these. For the smaller schools, for the LACs that are not totally popular yet, you can get a lot of mileage out of doing early decision 1, or as it's called, early decision 2, which almost all liberal arts colleges will offer. Early decisions 2 is a program that's the same thing as early decision 1, but it comes at a later time, January 1st. Why do colleges do this? Well, they will tell you in their marketing speak, because they want to give students an opportunity to submit a little bit more of their profile first semester of senior year to really make an impression. But I would say, in my cynical view, and a lot of people's cynical views, they are feeding on the rejects of early decision 1. So you're a business student that's applying early decision 1 to UPenn Wharton. You're not admitted. You freak out. Oh, good Lord, I'm never going to be able to partake in the wonderful, joyful world of finance. What am I going to do? And then NYU, not an LAC, but they offer early decision 2, comes along and says, hey, we have a program called Early Decision 2, where you can still commit yourself, get that leverage in the application. If we take you, you have to go, but you'll get into a top 5 finance program. And then panic-stricken students will rush to NYU with their $90,000 plus cost of attendance. That's non-negotiable. So again, I think it's something, it's disingenuous on the college's part to suggest it's something more than business for ED2 and even for ED1 for that matter. But welcome to the world of college admissions. Also, as I mentioned here, students can take advantage of high ED admit rates in most mid-level schools. BU, Northeastern, Case Western Reserve, Baylor, Villanova. Do you want to commit Santa Clara? Do you want to commit yourself there? Well, that's the question. Again, can't negotiate financial aid and scholarship offers, and you're going to a school where might not have the name recognition as some of the others. Did ED help our students? Yeah, to a certain extent. Yeah, I mean, 2 out of the 3 Penn were early. One from the Lower Peninsula, one from the Fremont area. Chicago ED2, private. Claremont ED2, San Mateo. Case Western and Northeastern. I bring these 2 up because these schools are notorious for taking students. They're notorious for treating the business like it is a business. And if you want to commit yourself, you want to commit your money to Northeastern University or Case Western University, you are getting a very, very fair, very, very generous shake. In fact, they don't even make students write the essays in order to apply. That's how they generate the number of applications that they do, and how they can afford to be so selective. You pay an application fee, you see what winds up happening. And if you're applying ED1 or ED2, the odds are heavily in your favor. The great story that I like to tell from about 8 years ago is a student he was from a local school, a traditional school in China, and he applied EA to Case Western Reserve, and he got deferred to regular decision, which is something that can happen. If you apply EA, you can be admitted, denied, or deferred. Your application's kicked to regular. His application was kicked to regular, and he was just so annoyed. He's like, I should have got into Case Western Reserve. They invited him to a deferred students reception at a hotel in Beijing. And we were wondering, why are you getting invited to this reception for just deferred students? So he goes back and forth with the director over to the regional rep, and it comes to find out that the reception is a place where they pitch Case Western again. And if you decide to commit to an early decision 2 agreement, they admit you on the spot. So there you go. It's something where it's you can't be just a disaster with coming out of juvie with a 2.0 and like an 800 on the SAT. But if you're a marginally good applicant, you got the numbers. Yeah, you apply ED, they'll be generous. For the most part, though, you can get a lot of mileage out of the mid-level schools. You get some mileage out of the Ivies, but keep in mind, you got a lot of the ED admit rates are inflated by connected folks. But ED will help. Is it worth it? It depends on you, your commitment to the school, your relationship with money, and other things that we'll discuss during our time over the coming months. Okay, now that's one thing that I've mentioned with early. The other with that's early decision. Now let's talk about early action. Early action is something that almost inevitably you're going to do. Early decision is the one where you say, you let me in, I'll go. I'm committed, I'm bound, I'm there. Early action, as I said before, is basically you apply by November 1, you get an earlier reply to your application, but no massive statistical advantage. In fact, there's in almost no cases is there a reported statistical advantage. So why would you want to put yourself through the stress of getting stuff done by the early action deadline? Because of this, if you're applying to a competitive major and you're coming from out of state, if you don't apply by early action, you're going to be at a disadvantage compared to in-state kids for RD. There's not going to be any seats left, especially for out-of-state kids, for kids applying to CS, engineering, some business programs. If a public school offers early action, and you're out of state, you should take advantage. If you're the public school offers early action, you're in state, you should probably take advantage of it. You're always going to get a better review, I would say. For private schools, it doesn't make any difference. Private schools, it doesn't matter. For MIT, they'll release the statistics. There's no difference. And for most private schools that offer early decision also, given the choice, the kid applying early action, no commitment, the kid applying early decision, committing themselves, their GPA, their higher test score, and their money, who are you going to take? Who are you going to lean toward? Like Chicago offers early decision and early action, and I've never seen, since they've offered early decision, I've never seen an early action kid get in. So for students that are applying to public schools early, students that are applying to public schools out of state to competitive majors, which basically all CS, engineering, and a number of business kids are, you're going to be applying to a lot of schools by 11-1. We had a student last year that applied to 9 schools by 11-1. Pre-med kids, bio kids that have a lot of pride, they'll have a good number of private schools on there. When you do bio, you don't necessarily want to go to a massive public that has tons of weeder classes and stuff like that. So those kids will apply to a number of privates that largely don't have early action. So those kids will apply to like 1 or 2 or 3 schools early and everything else by the January 1 deadline. For the engineering kids, it's front loaded. That makes life easier on the back end, but it makes life unpleasant in October. Okay. So, as I've mentioned before, just under different verbiage, like twice already, a private college tendency. This is another trend, shifting gears. Pardon me for shifting things so quickly, but just to kind of go back, wrapping things up. Early decision, early action. Early decision, private schools, you want to take advantage of it. It'll give you an edge. Early action, public schools. You want to take advantage of it. Statistically speaking, across the board, probably nothing that's going to be disclosed, but in the more competitive majors, it's no mystery. You got to apply earlier for an out-of-state kid. So that's another trend. Early action worked well for a lot of our kids. Early decision, as I said, the majority of our admits at the top schools were admitted to RD. So take that for what you will. As I mentioned again, moving on to another trend, a private school tendency. A challenging curriculum, high test scores, legitimate curiosity, a deep, extracurricular profile that's been well developed. You don't need to be perfect. And by the way, you don't need to be perfect. A couple of B's can be forgiven there. The B's can be forgiven really if you've got the challenging curriculum. If you're taking like one AP course between 9th and 12th and you get like a couple of B's and several of them were in that AP course, you're only going to get, so much kind of weight, so much generosity, so much of the benefit of the doubt. But if you're taking the most difficult curriculum that your school offers, and the colleges will typically know this by this section of the Common Application School Report Form that'll lay out if your school ranks, how difficult your actual curriculum was compared to other students at the school. If this is where it should be, the applicant is taking the most demanding curriculum at his or her school in comparison to other college prep students, then that works out. But you need that demanding curriculum in there for this to all work out. So let's check out a couple of students that have that have had that very that have had that very experience. Ravinder, this Ravinder's our Rice admit. But I think he was Ravi in the last one. Okay, so at least I got his short name right. Okay, so and obviously not the real name. But a high level of honors and AP work admitted to Rice. The Irvington student without access to a lot of top honors AP classes admitted Wash U. Student with a couple of B's from the Peninsula, real good weight though, admitted Penn. A student that goes to a school that doesn't offer AP courses or IB courses, still took the toughest curriculum available at his school. We'll call him Andre. A handful of B's admitted to Chicago. Everybody going after the most demanding curriculum. Everybody going in going after the AP classes in the humanities and social science things, and not shying away from those. You know, in some cases, you've got to like, I'm sure there's some people thinking like out there, like, boy, my son or daughter, you know, she's got 4 B's already in ninth grade. I should just go crazy and do nothing but APs for 10th, 11th, and 12th. You got to still be, you know, reasonable about what the student can handle. You know, if the student is like, you know, for these kids, you know, they got B's, but I would say that none of them really, at least when we're like looking at their classes and planning things out and discussing them, I didn't feel that any of them were totally in over their head. They could handle it. They were in the right progression with math, with language other than English. So it's something that it was reasonable for them. I would not say that putting a student in a situation where they had to handle, you know, just a mess of AP classes in order to offset the B's that they've already gotten, I would not say that that's an interesting idea, but probably not going to wind up working out. So yeah, okay. So trend 5 just went through the same thing that I said in multiple other ways, you know, challenging curriculum, rigorous curriculum, solid test scores, good grades, and a marginally developed extracurricular profile gets you in the conversation. You know, what else seemed to have helped this year? The uncommon major thing seemed to have helped. And, you know, I'm coming at that a little bit reluctantly because you know, for traditionally colleges admit via universities admit via college, not necessarily via major. You know, like Cal, the way that they used to do it is the best. UCLA, the way that they do it is the best example. UCLA, under the College of Letters and Sciences, you know, has data theory, applied math, astrophysics, English, philosophy. It doesn't matter what you apply to. Everybody's getting admitted at the same rate. There's nothing that's harder than anything else. And a lot of engineering programs, that'll be the same. You know, with engineering admissions are different than liberal arts scholar, than letters and sciences admissions. Business admissions are different than letters, arts, and sciences admissions. But within the college, it was generally, unless it was engineering, it would usually be kind of like the more or less the college itself, engineering, business, letters, and sciences, dictated the selectivity rather than the individual major itself. That's not happening anymore. I mean, obviously, you have Berkeley that's identified these high demand majors like data science, computer science, and all other things. But this is a little bit different than that. This is like at private schools, and even like high demand majors at Cal. So the Rice student I said this year, are the numbers of general semesters? Excellent question. Pardon me for not going. Anonymous attendee. Thank you, anonymous attendee. Are the number of semesters, honors, and APs counted from just 9th to junior or all 4 years? All 4 years is what I'm going for with this. Summer before 9th, for you crazy kids at basis that are probably taking AP classes then, to spring of 12th, projected grades through 12th grade. That's the number, and it's number of semesters. So not number of years. It's not like these kids have 28 full year classes. It's 28 semesters, you know, still a ton. But Berkeley and LA average, to put it in context, 23 semesters of honors and AP. So, you know, 10th grade Chem, 10th grade Pre-Calc Honors, 10th grade Chinese 4 Honors, 11th grade AP Chem, AP Calc BC, AP Chinese, AP Lang, A Push, 2 classes in 12th, and you're already at 20 semesters. So, hard, difficult, easier said than done. I couldn't do it, but you not as bananas as it sounds by just looking at the numbers. So excellent question. Let me see, was there anything else beyond that? Okay, good. All right, good. I can get out of that. Thank you. Now that's closed. All right, I answered live. Yes. All right, I got to click done, I guess. This is what happens when you use the webinar thing once every year. So in addition to Rice, we had the Rice business student. Cornell, industrial and labor relations, interested in going after economics under arts and sciences, interested in going under business. We decided on ILR. ILR is an unusual, funky major at Cornell. It's actually a college. It's a college of industrial and labor relations. It's something that's different, where it addresses labor relations, a lot of pre-law stuff, union organizing, and general principles of economics and business. So a lot of students after this will go into law school, they'll go into labor relations work, or they'll go into like investment banking, management consulting mostly. Penn, one of the Penn admits. One of them we had was CS, one of them we had was bio. The other one that I felt was the surprising one among the 3 that got in, logic, information, and computation, a major under arts and sciences, that really complemented her profile very, very well. Thoughtful in speech and debate, also into data science stuff, did some programs in data science, brought it together wonderfully. Emory, East Asian Studies, that's something that I think most people would realize is not a very popular major for students from around here, regardless of ethnic background. I'll go to Claremont McKenna. Claremont McKenna, PPE, philosophy, politics, and economics, something a little bit different, something that shows a little bit of a thoughtful angle. And Cal, not unusual majors, but certainly not the most common majors. Art history, art practice, and English. The majors themselves, even within like econ at Cal, we had a couple of kids admitted to that, but it was still very, very difficult. Claremont McKenna doing standard economics this past year, very, very difficult. Emory pre-med, rough. So the Rice one was the one that was the most indicative, because the Rice one was something that we were able to trace to a newly opened major. That's something that will it play out, in the coming years? I don't think it's a bad idea. I think if a student has the option to apply for something they've got the background for, that they can potentially move out of, transfer out of without much of an issue, and that's a little bit unusual, I think that definitely is an advantage, and we'll work on that. Takeaways from all of this, from everything that we have here, computer science at the University of California is super hard, and engineering isn't that much easier. There's still some angles to get into various UCs, as well as out-of-state schools. But it is harder, no matter how you cut it. Even though Wisconsin and Purdue and Vatech are still accessible for CS, it would be hard. It would be easier to get in with English or non-impacted major. Leadership, again, another thing to take away, wins with UC. And if we, whenever we work together, if we work together early enough, we want to try and enhance the leadership. Leadership, as I've said before, it always pays dividends. Colleges covet it for its own sake. And more, I believe they're using it as a blunt instrument, where it's just one way of separating kids from one group of kids from other kids. Where you have, there's fewer editors in chief. There are fewer captains of sports teams. There's fewer ASB presidents than there are followers in those particular areas. So leadership, among other things, I would say has been used largely as a blunt instrument to separate one student from the next. This year, UC got 200,000 applications. When I was there, I was reading, it was like 5 minutes an app. That was 2006, last time I did that. So I think that the And now 200,000 applications. I remember when, UCLA got like 50,000. It was a big deal. 200,000 across the campus is insane. NYU Arts and Sciences this past year, more than 100,000 applications. NYU Arts and Sciences admitting at less than 5%. This is the safety net college at NYU. Maybe Steinhardt a little bit more, but overall, Arts and Sciences, it's not Stern, it's not Tandon, it's not Tisch. It's like, you want to get into NYU, you typically apply to Arts and Sciences. For 5% is like the admit rate of Harvard. It's insane. Not quite, I would say the level of students, but you get the idea. So leadership wins with UC. Leadership, I think, is transferable to everyone, because leadership is just something that's so generally needed by colleges, as well as the fact that leadership is something that allows schools to separate one student from another one with a little bit more ease, even though it's not going to have as much depth in the review or in the evaluation. Applying widely helps for the top 20. I say this, but I don't want to get myself into trouble or get you all into trouble with applying, because one thing about this year is that it was hard. We got to start pushing safeties, and I'm going to get to this with the trends in the next slide. But safeties are no longer, for computer science and for engineering, they're not in the UC system. Safeties for most students are going to wind up falling outside of the top 60, top 70, top 75 in the country by the US News rankings. So I'm saying applied widely to the top 20, because you never know whose demographics or whose demographic needs are what, and who might need a hard charging economics major from Monta Vista, and they've got that spot. But statistically speaking, it's likely that you can apply to all top 20 schools, you get denied to every single one of them, and that does not feel good. So although I say applying widely helps for the top 20, you can't go all in. It's not good for your mental health to go through that to begin with. I mean, there's a girl on Reddit that I think applied to 128 colleges. That's bananas. So you probably shouldn't have the time for that to begin with. But also the denial, even if you get into one, getting denied to 19 out of 20, just to throw that out there. It's tough, man. And in an age when so many people's mental health seems to be dependent on the outcomes, you can get yourself into a lot of trouble. So I try and offset that a little bit. But it is something where it's kind of becoming like a little bit of a barbell, where students are like, okay, I'm gonna push it to the limit on the top 20. I'm gonna have my pocket of safeties. The middle's gonna get taken up by UC, and that's okay. But just realize the middle's not being taken up by UC anymore. And you got to push the safeties out of the top 70 if you want to have legitimate safeties. So yeah, a lot of good news for a Sunday afternoon. Okay, next one. Rigor can offset less than perfect grades, but don't go into this with a lot of B's, C's, and thinking that, man, I'm gonna just kill the AP courses and everything's gonna be all good. It could make things quite a bit tougher. So you have to be set up for that. Obviously, these are things we would discuss, but just be aware of that for the future. And being a little bit unusual with the major can help. The only problem with that is it's like the liberal arts colleges. I've been trying to promote it for years, but it's not like anybody takes me up on it. What are you going to like? You're not going to, I really want to get into an Ivy. Okay, well, let's go to the gender studies route. Hey, hold on. I don't want to get into the Ivies that badly. I still want to be employable and not have to have a crazy preparation. Good question too. Does UC just a kind of backup? Does UCU seem to favor students from public schools versus private schools? That's an absolutely outstanding and excellent question. This year, it's going to be interesting to see. Right now, I don't know what direction that things are trending. In the past, I would say that there's been more opportunities for UC to select students from public schools rather than private schools. I mean, one of my criteria when I was reading was looking at the school's academic performance index. If they were a fourth or fifth quintile underperforming school, we would give students extra points. That's part of UC's philosophy, to be the part of the rising tide that lifts all boats. St. Francis, University, Bellarmine, Harker are not going to be a fourth or fifth quintile underperforming school. Free and reduced lunch. What proportion of the students are on free and reduced lunch? Is the kid on free and reduced lunch? Public schools kids, a lot of them are. Single parent homes, a lot of them are. So that a lot of it has to do more with income than anything else. But in the past, public school students, and in addition to the fact that they could be ELC certified, identified, eligibility in the local context, eligible in the state context, meaning they're part of the top 9, top 12% in the school or the state. That's only done for public schools. That could wind up playing out too. There was a time, though, in the not too distant past, where there was a very believable rumor that UC was targeting high-income kids to admit. Why would that be the case? Because UC traditionally does not give much scholarship money, and they don't give a whole lot of free money in terms of institutional aid either. So what does that mean for low-income kids? They're going to go to Cal State, and they're going to wind up, they're going to live at home, and they're going to pay, $15,000 a year in cost of attendance, or they'll do a community college, and then they'll transfer to UCs or Cal States. Point being that you couldn't have your yield depend on low-income kids because they weren't going to yield to UC. So there was a rumor that students that were coming from high rent districts, high income districts, high income zip codes would wind up getting a preference. Would that help prefer private school kids over public school kids? Maybe, maybe not. Ultimately, there's not going to be any sort of, there's not going to be any criterion where UC is going to, prefer public over private. They'll just be kind of, aspects of the application that private school students or public school students can take advantage of a little bit more than private school students. I'm not going to go into all the benefits and the drawbacks. One suspicion I did have this year, based on very, very small sample size, was that UC was targeting students coming from underperforming or low performing schools this past year. This is where I don't have when I was at UC, I could have the data, but because I've worked with a lot of low income schools. But again, around here, there's not many. Silver Creek High School, a lot of success for the students that were from there. The low income school, kind of underperforming. But on the flip side, students from another East Side Union High School district school didn't work out well. Small sample size, but nothing you can say with that. So when we know about this in practice in September, which is too late for anyone for the most part. But that's when the UC counselor conference is, and that's when UC really starts officially releasing aggregated data. For Bastard. But before this year, I would say that, maybe there were waves, maybe there were rumors, or things that students at particular schools could kind of like pick up on or take advantage of. ELC, eligibility in the local context, like I was saying. But there's nothing that on paper UC is going to, prefer. Prefer in-state residency. That's about it. And even then, undocumented, AB 540. As long as you graduate from California high school, 3 years there, you have to be a California resident. You can be undocumented. So yeah, great question. So I'd say, yeah. And this year, to be honest, it doesn't seem like it mattered at all. One of UC's traditional schools, obviously, is Mission. Mission, it was just like brutal, Similarly, St. Francis, not good with UC. Harker's hit or miss. Harker, I'm trying to think. But yeah, this year is going to be very, very interesting to see. UC does have some tools to allow you to see on the broad level where students are coming from in terms of high schools, but the data isn't very nuanced and it's not going to appear until after the summer. So yeah, good question now. So coming back to this, being unusual with a major can help. If I get people early enough, I like to try and steer them in that direction. But like I say, I like to try to steer students in the direction of liberal arts colleges as well, and that doesn't work. So like I was saying earlier, gender studies, you want to go that direction, love it. But getting buy-in can be tough with that. And you have to have a whole lot of things, other things that play into the profile and so forth. So forthcoming trends. So let me give you a little evaluation of my predictions from last year and how they worked out. So these are my predictions from last year, the presentation that I gave. That this year we would have even more of a role of the tests, where the tests, in spite of being test optional, test flexible, they're going to come more into vogue, more into fashion as something that's considered as a main component of the reads. I would say that was the case. We don't deal with a whole lot of low test score students, so that's something that was restrictive. But the tests were as advertised before the pandemic. They were important, a significant component of the review. Obviously not the case with UC, since they're legally barred from considering them for admission. But for everybody else, it looks like the tests, I'm sure David Coleman, president of College Board, and his annual $2 million salary are very happy with that. So another last year prediction, normalcy with the numbers. There'd be no more gap years that kids would take as a post-pandemic kind of measure in order to make sure they enjoy their college experience. So it'd be back to normal, like before the numbers for the pandemic. Not at all. The exact opposite happened. I would say that a lot of that is going to be not going to stop, because it's especially with UC. The UC numbers were just catastrophic for CS. And that's not going away. Why? Because test blind isn't going away. So, the only thing that's going to help us, I'll get to that in the next slide. So normalcy did not happen. The opposite of what I would consider normalcy, or maybe it's the new normal, happened. We'll see. I did not think that the wait list would be employed as extensively, and that does seem to be the case, but there has been a good amount of movement on the wait list, in particular with UC. A bunch of students getting moved off of Santa Barbara, a bunch of students getting moved off of Irvine. I don't know if we've had any Berkeley movement, but I'm, applying to college and on Reddit, on Twitter, I've seen a bunch in there, College Confidential. I thought last year that liberal arts colleges would get more competitive. We don't have enough data on that personally. They haven't released a whole lot of numbers this year. If the top ones are likely getting more competitive, I would say that there still is the option for students to take advantage of ED. Especially at LACs, where they're not going to get the same shake at a top university. You're applying, to Penn or Swarthmore, you're going to just get much more of a better shake at Swarthmore. Everybody wants to go to Penn. Everybody knows it. Trump went there, but Swarthmore's also in Philadelphia. Leadership will continue to differentiate. Yeah, it's got to be the case. I mean, we're getting to the point, where it is something where scarcity is just going to be the main driver of admissions type things, just because the only way to evaluate students is based on the number of or the only way to to evaluate students is going to be based on who's done the most scarcely represented activity. Definitely not. I'm being facetious, but you get the idea. I believe there was a question, a hand raised. Hop in and please feel free to ask the question in the Q&A or in the chat. That'll may allow me to address it, kind of easier. So if you have a question, feel free to type it in. The hand raising and calling on things is always, it always winds up being a little bit of a mess. So this makes things a little bit cleaner. This coming year's predictions for this year, what I see is happening. Rigor will continue to differentiate, largely as a blunt instrument to separate one student from another. Leadership will continue to differentiate, largely as a blunt instrument to separate one student from another. That's again, there's certain things that only certain number of students can take advantage of, and there's certain things that anybody can be a member of a club. Fewer people can be the president of a club. Fewer people still can be the president of a class. So, the massive leadership positions, to the extent, also co-curricular versus like outside of school, can help a little bit more. Does co-president of a mock trial team check off the leadership box? I would say so. That's a big one. I think that, obviously president of the United States would be better, but, you can always be, there's always, gradations in the continuum. But yeah, president of a club, I would say, this is the thing. It's checking off a box. I would say that the leadership stuff would be more than I don't know. I found this, that you're never going to go wrong with it. You know, it's something that if it's a matter of like, especially as I don't know, I would say like volume as well as level. The leadership stuff really is something that, it's the kitchens and bathrooms of college, of extracurricular activities. Like, the more you sink into it, the more return on investment you get. With something like that, is co-president of mock trial, enough to, probably, depending on the size of the mock trial program, depending on any sort of accolades that may have resulted from mock trial, depending on what you're doing and maybe how significant of your profile it might be. But is it enough where you could afford, or you'd want to turn down other significant, substantial leadership positions because you're like, I got that covered? I'd say no. It's one of those things that you can always add a little bit more of, and it's going to wind up working. So rigor, continuing to differentiate, leadership, continuing to differentiate, uncommon majors, at least not being at a disadvantage. A lot of this comes from UC, and I've got a little bit of post-traumatic stress from UC myself this year with computer science, but that's the big thing. Safeties for most students, as I said, will move outside of the top 75 in the country. And that's, it really is just like there's once you get to that number, you will find, at least these days, a lot of schools where you can ride in the grades and the tests. As I've said before, that usually our first meeting that we have is like, if you're a brain in the pan of water with electrodes coming out of you, and you've got a good transcript, you're still going to probably be admitted to, everybody outside of the top 75, top 80 in the country. And that's kind of the way that it still is. If you've got the numbers, if you've got a way to raise the profile, if you're higher than the average there, you're more likely than not going to wind up getting in, and maybe getting a little money to kind of tempt you to go there. The higher up you get in the rankings, the more that your numbers stop mattering as a criterion for admission. The more that the numbers are kind of like a criterion for just being taken seriously. And then after that, the other stuff winds up getting you in. But you get outside of the top 75, the top 80, the SAT score that you have that might be low for Lynbrook and Monte Vista is probably like 350, 400 points higher than national average. So a school like RPI, RIT is going to look at you fondly. One thing for the future, the more or less distant future, so this isn't for next year, but as a lot of parents might remember, and certainly none of the students remember, but a lot of people stopped having babies during the Great Recession of 2007, 2008, 2009, right around that neck of the woods. So there's what's called a demographic cliff, at least for college-age students, that could impact admissions from our area. I think they're projecting a 15% drop in college-age students, and it doesn't seem like it's going up after that, which is a very interesting thing. But maybe I haven't looked far enough into the data in the future. Is that going to make a difference? Probably. How much will it make a difference? I don't know. I don't know if it's going to make a difference at schools like St. Mary's or University of the Pacific that just want to kind of fill their rosters, versus how much it's going to make a difference at like Stanford, Harvard, Princeton, Yale, as far as making accommodations for other students. But yeah, the demographic cliff is hopefully going to be a breath. It's going to be hopefully a breath of fresh air, or perhaps a pause on the lunacy that's, unexpectedly, everybody encountered since the pandemic and since schools went a little bit test optional and blind. Okay, so one more thing before I get to the other question. All right, thank you for your time. I thought I had another thing in there. Don't I have slides? I thought I had, I don't. I did. Oh, this is it. Okay, good. It's on there. I guess I just skipped it. Okay, so for seniors, be on the lookout for a series of videos that address the college essays are scheduled for the summer, letter of recommendation requests, and so forth. I'm going to be probably putting these on our YouTube channel tonight, so you can check them out. 5 to 10 minutes a piece. Edited for animations and so forth. By Ahmed on Fiverr, so don't hold me too responsible for the animations, but at least they'll be compelling. That's number one. By the end of this month, like the next 10 to 12 days, it would be good to have 2 teachers identified and requested for letters of recommendation. And as I emphasized this in our meetings, Shirley has sent out letters to this effect. But again, it would be nice to, in most normal parts of the country, people don't ask until the application season. In the Bay, in addition to the cost of living and the traffic, we also get to deal with everybody asking for letters of recommendation before summer. So if your teachers look at you like you have three heads after asking them for letters of recommendation in May, no big deal, at least you got it out there. But you want to avoid the more popular teachers being filled up, which is inevitably the case at a lot of schools. I'm looking at you, Mission San Jose. And a reminder, please submit essays more than 48 hours. This is from Riley. For the app deadlines, they can be reviewed for more than grammar and sentence level issues. This isn't an issue right now. The earliest application deadline that we're going to run into is, I think, North Carolina on 10/15. And we've got some rolling stuff like Arizona State that doesn't require an essay in like July or August. But the earliest that we're going to have writing stuff that'll be due would be like 10/15. So it's like, 5 months away. But it piles up, a lot of heavy lifting with the writing. That's the big time suck, over the fall, both with you all as well as with my budget. So it's something that is painful for everybody all around. But so we would like to get things that it doesn't help my budget, but we'd like to get things done earlier rather than a little bit later. Yeah. So thank you for your time. And let me check. We got a couple of other questions answered. Okay. By med major. Okay. Will this be in biology? Something different. 2 schools nailed down. All right, good. I should have elaborated on that. Okay. By a med major, meaning the more competitive majors. Or by let me just see what that may have been in reference to. This is why I tend to look at them. Business med. I think that bio is one of those that if you can find a way to get around it in such a way that's going to be a little bit different, then I would probably promote it. And that could be through anything from public health to epidemiology to nursing, in the case that nursing admit rates for the particular student are higher. That's not going to be the case at UC, but it would be at a school like NYU for males. PA programs are usually combined, so nothing like that. But something that is going to not, something that's, it's the more you, the more you can comfortably, with your interests and with the extracurricular profile, have a major different than something like pre-med / bio research. I think that the better we're going to be. If you have nothing aside from bio research and you've lived for life science research, then great. We go down that road. If you're a little bit iffy and you're on the fence and you're like, I like biostats, I like public health, and I like chemistry, but I really want to go to medical school. We don't want to touch medical school. We want to go with somebody that's going to be like chem. Just in order to give the reader a different read on the application, the evaluator a different look at you. With college admissions, it's always about, or not, it's a lot of the admissions is about a game of minority, meaning that you're the less represented you are, the better things are going to be for you. Does it always work out that way? No. Does it work out that way with regard to major? Usually, typically it doesn't work out that way unless it's like engineering. But in order to hedge our bets, it would be good to look at something, to look at a field of study other than the real traditional ones. So that was the one question that was asked. Another question that was asked is, what do you mean by 2 schools nailed down by mid-June? That by the middle of June, when we finish up with the common application, as well as start wrapping up the University of California applications, which should both be in process by then, we would like to know who we're going to move on to next. And we'll do that through discussion, figuring out the final school list and so forth. But, there are almost certainly a couple of schools that everybody in their mind has that they're definitely going to apply to. I would just like to know about those by mid-June after we meet about it, or if you have something that you definitely want to do to allow us to get in front of outlining the applications, outlining the essays, because we want to make sure that there's not any lag time, that we always have a couple going. Because as I said, that's just so much of the heavy lifting over the course of the fall, and it's real hard to get creativity on demand. So we want to, the earlier we can nail down schools, even if it's like, I know I want to apply to Michigan. Great. Michigan's got a long YS essay and a long activity essay. It'll give us some time to get through it, as well as produce some good fodder for future applications. So we'll talk about that and we'll discuss them, but it's really just a matter of making sure that, you know, we have a smooth progression of the essays and that you're not sitting around twiddling your thumbs after doing Common App and UC. And now with that, I can say thank you for your time. And I can say, any questions? What's on your mind? Feel free to ask. You can ask me, you know, one-on-one. You can ask me via email. Oh, we got another. Nice. Thank you, Eddie. Oh, you're so nice. You don't have to thank me. Thank you for being you, anonymous attendee. Having trouble with pronunciation today. Okay. For private school supplements, should the approach be more creative or direct, straightforward? Excellent question. That's very, very good. It should meet the level of creativity of the supplement. So if University of Chicago asks you a question of where's Waldo really, we don't want to address that with a 5-paragraph essay looking through the Where Waldo comics and trying to figure out really where might he be. Is he bright in the UK? Actually, that might be kind of cool, but it's got to be presented in a creative way. I'll give you a good illustration. Last year, we had a good supplemental essay with Chicago, which was, the question was, the prompt was, an alien visits Earth for the first time. What music, book, or work of art would you use to present to them? And our Chicago admin, the first draft of what piece would it be? He chose Beethoven's Ode to Joy, which is cool. But the way that it was presented was flat. It was just like, you know, upon realizing that a Martian had visited Earth for the first time, I understood that I had the opportunity to show them a piece of work that was going to impress them. And it was a real linear discussion that addressed the question. Through the edits, we needed to make it more creative. We needed to give imagery. We needed some dialogue. We needed stuff in there that was going to maybe, you know, drop in some real oral stuff for sound. So you need to meet the creativity of the prompt, the creativity of the essay. On the flip side, for a question like, what do you want to study at Purdue? Well, you said private schools. Why Boston University? 250 words or fewer. You could go either way on that. If you could, you know, usually with something like that, we would want to make it about 50% about the school, 50% about the students and what they'll bring to the school. But you can make it catchy and a cool essay. You know, you could talk about the, one piece in the collection of Jewish artifacts they have on display at the library that really resonated with you and maybe your family history, and then go into how that would exploring that at BU would wind up making it a little bit more, would really fulfill you a lot. So that's creative and interesting, but it's not set up in kind of a wacky, unusual way. With the Chicago prompt and with some of the real unusual ones that otherwise you do have to set them up in a real different way. We've had students that have addressed Chicago in letter formats and diary formats, a real weird postmodern deconstruction type format. We've got like, because it's an uploadable doc, you can mess around with stuff before you convert it to a PDF. Where they'll have like a line and a blank space and then stuff vertically written in the margin. So yeah, meet the creativity, or we want to meet the creativity of the prompt with the creativity of the actual essay itself. If it's a real straightforward prompt, then we can get creative and elaborate, and that makes it more interesting, but there's not as much of a need to it or an expectation of as which the real weird ones. Good question. Does ED give a noticeably better chance than EA? Yeah, well, it depends at the school. I mean, with you know, like I said, for us, you know, no matter how the numbers shook out this year, you know, these are the numbers more or less from the Ivies and these are from the LACs. You know, they're pronounced over the country and over the course of all the applicants. You know, for our group, it was okay. It was good. You know, it worked out well. I wouldn't say it was necessary. I would say this. I would say in the case of some schools, you have to. I would say in the case of Chicago, you got to. You never get, you just don't, students that apply RD, I don't see many of them getting. In Chicago, it's just taken such a massive proportion of its applicants from the ED round. For Penn, what is it? Yeah, I mean, now speaking of Penn, I think it's something like 40 to 45% of the freshmen at Penn come from the ED. So, you know, at schools like that, where they're taking a good proportion from ED, you know, I would say that your odds would be enhanced by applying under that plan. There aren't tons of schools that just like always do that though. Like Chicago, you know, they hold their ED cards close to the vest. But you'll hear stories about people that go to like information sessions and hear the dean making it they'll make a remark about like what the real admit rate is for ED, and I've read stories of them, or rumors that of course that apparently are validated, about them taking like 80% of their class from ED1 and ED2. So in that case, you know, I don't know how much your odds are going to be increased by applying ED, but they'll certainly be decreased by applying RD. But when we go through the schools, we go through that, I'll let you know. Like in some cases, like Carnegie Mellon, they're straight up front about it. You're not getting an advantage. And that's always been the case. Carnegie, even before they really made that declaration and were upfront about it, you know, you look in the numbers in the common data set, you do the math, and it was like a 1 to 2% difference in acceptance rate between the between RD and ED. So yeah, it helps notably at some schools. It's almost necessary at some schools to get in at all, and other schools, they don't care about it. It varies from school to school based on their philosophy, and we discussed this based on the school that you're considering. Okay, good. Great. What is your recommendation? What is your recommendation for summer program to help college applications? Either go to a high-cost summer program at some famous schools, or just take more AP classes at community college? Which would be more helpful? Man, that's a great question. I think that I would say it depends on the summer program and it depends on the student. There are some summer programs that legitimately will move the needle. Are they high-cost summer programs? Typically not. Will high-cost summer programs still move the needle with some schools? Yeah. The Penn admit we had this past year from ED did the Penn summer program. The Jerome Fisher program at Penn in management and technology, they take, I think, 40 to 45% of their freshmen from the M&TSI summer program, Management and Technology Summer Institute. We've had multiple students that have done ESAP, engineering summer at Penn, that have ultimately found themselves at Penn. I don't have the, I mean, again, you know, small data sample, but still, it seems to work out there. The ED2 admit to Chicago, did the Chicago summer program. There were a couple of years where we had 3 and 4 and 5 kids admitted to Chicago, and all of them wound up doing the summer program there. USC, I mean, I've recommended to 1 or 2 students, if like USC is #1 on their list right now and they definitely want to go there and money's no object, then you do one of the USC summer programs, because USC doesn't have an early decision program. And last year they admitted like 6%. So the only way that you can really indicate an interest in USC, because they don't have early decision, is to do something at one of their programs to get acquainted with the school. So I would say in those cases, if you're targeting a particular school, you've been admitted to a particular program at that school, and you want to apply an early decision at that school, or it's #1 for you, then go for it. If you're going to be spending money like 12 grand over the course of a summer to do such and such summer college, no matter how fancy that program is, if you wanted to use some money for something else, I wouldn't dissuade you from doing it. Let's put it that way. And depending on the major also, sorry to complicate this even further, but like you're a bio kid, you can't do like DIY stuff. You can't do lab. You don't have wet lab like facilities usually in your house. If you want to do lab work, you're kind of forced to go to one of these things. So it's you're not forced, but you get the idea. It's another reason to go to one of those. So depending on what you want to get out of it, depending on what you want, how much you want to spend, I would say, it's personal. I would say this though, outside of the individual school stuff, like individual schools being impacted by their own programs, usually the less it costs, the more it's going to impact. RSI, Clark Scholars, Beaverworks, SSP isn't even that much. All of these are going to wind up moving the needle to a certain extent. Cosmos costs money, but it's largely subsidized by the state, and it still moves the needle a lot with UC. So again, depends on the school, but I would say usually the cheaper ones, this is like, reverse of you get what you pay for. A question. Can we apply both EA and ED? That is an excellent question. That seems like it would have a simple answer, but it doesn't at all, as everything doesn't at all. If you are applying to a school ED, you can apply to 1 million non-restrictive EA schools. Restrictive EA schools include Stanford, Harvard, Yale, Princeton. Meaning that if you apply to one of those schools under their early action policy, you cannot apply to any school early decision. Maybe Notre Dame is under REA also. I think it might be. So if you apply to HYPS or Notre Dame, then you can, which is under REA, restrictive early action, you can apply to nowhere early decision. Restrictive early action is set up in such a way that it allows students to identify their first choice, especially among private institutions, and basically tell HYPS or Notre Dame, you're my first choice. And it allows them to do that without being on the hook for 70, 80, 90 grand a year. So it opens things up for more low-income kids, just for the reason for that. Otherwise, if it's a non-restrictive early action school, you can apply EA or ED and 1 million of them. I mean, like last year, we had a student apply to 9 early. He did Chicago ED and then EA, Purdue, Wisconsin, Illinois, Michigan, Georgia Tech, Texas, 1 or 2 others. And that's becoming more and more standard, especially with the engineering students. As I said, you might have one private school you really want to go to. Like, I really want to gun for Penn or Cornell and apply there. And then it's for the publics. You got to apply early for those. Or like I said, you'll be at a disadvantage behind the in-state kids. So yes, you can apply EA and ED. Good question. Just a confirmation. If a student is to apply ED, doesn't mean there's no chance to get any scholarship. You are bound to go if accepted with paying all the required amounts. Kind of. If you apply ED, there's a chance you can get the scholarship. There's a chance you can get need-based financial aid. Nevertheless, if you get in, you got to go, regardless of what they wind up coming through with. You don't have the opportunity to negotiate the financial aid offer. You don't have the opportunity to negotiate the scholarship. There will be the opportunity to back out of an ED agreement if between the time that you apply and the time you get in or got to commit, there's a significant change in the family's financial situation. So that's good. Something else that's good to note about that is that usually for ED schools, students that are applying to top 20 schools more often than not. Some students will apply to Northeastern ED, which is not a bad idea strategically, but usually students are applying to top 20 schools. Usually those schools will have, a commitment to meeting the need of the students. And in many cases, especially with the Ivies, they're committed to meeting the 100% of the need with free money. How much does that help somebody that's making 300 grand working for Tesla, but paying like $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 a month a note on their house? I don't know, not that much. I mean, you're not going to be low income by federal standards, but it's just like in the Bay, what are you going to do? That's the thing. That's the problem with where we're at. But yeah, in essence, you're right. You don't have the opportunity to negotiate unless things change dramatically. They'll tell you should have known, it's here in black and white. And you got to get a counselor's signature on the ED form. So the counselor needs to, basically give their approval to it too. And what if you decide not to go? Well, they're not going to arrest you or even really give you that hard a time. But you can rest assured that the nobody's getting any ED from your high school for the next several years, just because the school will reasonably assume that the counselor there does not, adequately explain the ramifications of early decision. So yeah, you can back out of the agreement if you're like, you don't care about it, if you're like total sociopath. Like, yeah, there's reason to back out of anything. There's reason, everybody's got reasons for everything. But yeah, you lose the opportunity to negotiate when you commit yourself with ED. Okay, good question here. If you apply REA, can you apply ED as well? No. Only exception. If you apply REA, you're denied. You can apply ED2 somewhere. REA to Stanford, denied December 15th, apply ED2 to Claremont, McKenna, Harvey, Mudd by January 1, January 5. You can do that, but you can't do it at the same cycle. REA prevents students from, the only time you can even apply to a private school while doing REA is if that private school has a scholarship deadline that you must meet by the early action deadline or by the 11-1 deadline. There's one situation that I'm not entirely sure of. If you apply REA, can you apply ED as well? This is the situation. The state of Virginia has a couple of schools where you can apply ED. I believe you can apply early decision to William and Mary. Could you apply REA to Harvard while still applying? Yeah, you couldn't. They're restricted. They're restricted to ED too. It's not just state schools. Okay, so yeah, that thought experiment doesn't work. You apply REA. The only way you can apply ED is by getting denied to the REA school and then applying ED2. Okay, how good is Cosmos as a summer program and does it help students get into UCs? I think Cosmos is great. I think Cosmos is kind of beneath some students depending on what they've done, but Cosmos usually doesn't admit students that it's beneath. It's not like Cosmos is admitting students with a patent usually, and students usually aren't even applying there with a patent. But it's good. It's solid. There's good lab work. There's good interaction with students. There's great student life. People come out of there really feeling inspired. You get a lot of good fodder for the essays, and it does help with UC. It's a significant summer program. It's one of their babies. When we go through the UC application, you'll see there's a drop-down menu for selecting summer programs that you've gone to with a limited number of options, and Cosmos is one of them. So yeah, it matters. It's one of UC's things. It makes a difference, and it's subsidized by the state. So I think that as far as getting bang for your buck, you want to leverage admissions, especially at UC. Cosmos is fabulous. Very, very good. A lot of it depends on the other options. I mean, if it's a choice between doing Cosmos and working at at a lab at MIT doing publishable research, then you probably do the lab at MIT. But in the absence of other stuff that's tremendously better, Cosmos is great, and it does help with UC. With your experience, would you be able to say a top 50 private schools that would be more generous in grant scholarships for the students they accept? People with money, the Ivies. One of our students actually did a really good job. I'm not going to point him out, but he's done a really good job of identifying schools that commit to meeting 100% of the need. So with that, there are some schools out there that are going to have that, and there are plenty of lists out there that will show which schools do that. With that, the one thing that you do need to take into consideration is when meeting need, how much need will they meet with free money, work study and grant money versus loans, which can be federally subsidized and capped, or it can be uncapped, and so on and so forth. If you're not talking about need-based aid, and you're talking about like free money in terms of scholarship money, then instead of looking at the top 10, you look at the lower portion of the top 50, and you look at the private schools. Public schools typically are not going to give tons of money to out-of-state students, although they will. Purdue, for top kids, will give like $10,000 to $15,000 a year, as well as some other publics. But usually you get the majority, proportionally speaking, of the money from the privates. So within the top 50, Northeastern will probably come out of pocket to a certain extent. RPI, if it's I think it might be on the border of the top 50, would come out of pocket to a certain extent. Villanova would come out of pocket to a certain extent. BC might, Tulane might. But those are the schools where the sticker price is going to be high, and the discount, the scholarship money, is going to be intended to kind of lure students in as bait. But ultimately, scholarships for those schools, merit-based scholarships based on merit, will largely be based on the X and Y axis of the SAT and the GPA, and whatever quadrant you kind of fall into is the amount of money that you get. The more the school needs your numbers, the more they're willing to throw money at you in order to get you there. they're going to need your numbers more at Baylor than they will at Harvard, no matter who you are. So schools that are going to be a little bit lower in the rank, which basically is ranked by selectivity from the U.S. News, they're going to be the ones where the schools are throwing money at you, drop the cost of attendance to reel you in. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Good question. No, and this looks like the last one, but as you know, I'd like to talk, so please feel free to shoot more by me. If a student gets EA rejected, can they continue with a regular decision? Can they do a RD? No. If you do EA, you're done at that school. Or you can RD it anywhere else. But once you apply early to one school, if you're denied there, yeah, you're done. And for the case of private schools, we can appeal, but that doesn't work. UC, you can appeal. It tends to be a little bit more successful, but I mean, by a small margin. And that's usually because there's new stuff, or for whatever reason, the student feels as though they've omitted something on the application. But yeah, if you're rejected EA or ED, you cannot submit, you cannot apply and get accepted to RD. Excellent question. Boy, for a time I was running really far ahead, and now I'm behind. Well, thank you very much for your time with hanging out with me. If you wound up falling asleep through this and you'd like to get a recording, let me know. Riley will send you one. If you have trouble sleeping and you'd like to get a recording of this to help you fall asleep, then let me know. Riley will get you one. In all other cases, let me just see. Okay, good. For a high school student, what could they do with their research for medical and nursing majors? Nursing is hard. I don't know. I have not seen, research like practically or theoretically play out for nursing majors. I think that maybe when you wind up getting to even like masters of science in nursing, they're doing more management than like research. I guess maybe PhDs in nursing might do that, but the research stuff, it doesn't seem to directly translate to anything having to do with nursing. For something along the lines of med, obviously anything in the health sciences works. Anything from wet lab work to research using applied data science, to, as I said, biostatistics, public health type work, anything with life science stuff is going to demand some lab work. You're going to get that in high school. You'll get that in summer programs. As I said, unfortunately, a lot of the times you need to. I think that doing something where you're getting lab exposure outside of the school could be good. Biostats, online stuff. We've had students get to do remote work where they're employing Python in order to do kind of biostatistics type stuff. We have some working with students working face-to-face in wet labs at UCSF and Stanford and Santa Clara. All of these things are options. The only thing you need to take into consideration is that in our area, at least the Bay Area, if anonymous attendee is from there, there aren't that many places that'll do face-to-face wet lab work. Cal States are largely, they don't like the liability of having high schoolers on campus. Cal is often reluctant. It seems we've in the past, I've had a lot of success with UCSF. I think just because it's such a health or science oriented place, and there's so many faculty there that you can get it in some way or another. But if you're from the South Bay, you still got to make your way up to Parnassus campus, which would be an absolute nightmare. Okay, next one, just one more. See, however many more you like. I don't have anything else going on. How important is volunteering in the college application? I've said for a long time, I think that volunteering is a necessary but not sufficient condition to get into the top schools. It's good to show that you play well with others. It's good to show that you're not a sociopath. It's good to show that you've got concern for the community. But I would say if you land 100 hours of volunteering, get a PVSA medal, you're pretty much good to go. The only time that you might want more than that is if you have something that's really cool or really niche or really kind of embodies who you are. Like if you're into I don't know, you've got a student, you've got a brother with cerebral palsy and you're working for a nonprofit organization doing social media outreach that works with students with kids with cerebral palsy. Start doing that from 9th grade, get all the way up to marketing, social media director by 12th grade. That's a reason to do that. That relates to you. It's sustained service. It's relevant to you. Just walking around the track and Relay for Life for a couple of hours. And thankfully, nobody's passed away from cancer in your family or something like that. It's not going to play that big a role. So, a necessary but not sufficient condition, do what you need to do in order to have some kind of a presence. Presidential Volunteer Service Medal, usually not a bad gauge of that. But unless it's something real niche or real personal to you, I usually don't suggest making it the centerpiece of the application. But if it's niche and it is something, you definitely could. It's just there's so few stuff out there that is. Yeah. All right. I think I was supposed to go until 1, and now it's 1:55, and the last question came in at 1:52. So I'm going to consider us done. But thank you for your time. Again, the sleep and no sleep angles for getting copies of these still stand. So let me know questions, let me know comments. As always, let me know issues, concerns. Send this to your friends, send this to your enemies if you like them. And that's all for now. I'm going to end this as per the usual. Please let me know questions. And I will talk to you all soon. And thank you again, anonymous attendee, for your thanks. I'm going to wrap up the recording now. I'll talk to you all soon.